Woo! Down here, let's talk about what happens when you lose your head. This elegant piece of engineering is known as the guillotine. It was invented in 1789 by the French in order to harvest the forbidden head cheese. Excuse me, that's not actually true. Oh, I see what you were doing there. You should also tell them about the small novelty versions that were made and then used by the upper class to cut vegetables. That's actually a really good point. Nothing says upper class like decapitating a few vegetables. And if that's not classy enough for you, there were also toy versions made for the kiddies. Maybe we should be happy that there are violent video games now so we don't have kids running around practicing cutting the heads off of dolls and house mice. And if you thought that this practice was just from the past, well, I've got news for you. If you live in certain parts of the world today, you can still be beheaded, like these 37 people were in Saudi Arabia. All right, enough with the history lesson. What actually happens when the deed gets done? Well, first off, when you separate the melon from the stem, it is going to make quite a mess because you are going to get a stream of Kool-Aid that could eject up to 18 feet away from the body. Fast anatomy fact, there are actually 4 main arteries going up through your neck to supply blood to your brain. Once those arteries are severed, there's going to be a massive drop in blood pressure, and basically the brain is going to be cut off from oxygenated blood. And this is where it gets a little bit creepy. Oh, I see. Now is when it gets creepy. As it turns out, there's probably enough residual oxygenated blood in the system to keep your inner squid beast conscious for at least a few seconds. Combine that with the fact that your facial muscles and eyes and everything like that are controlled by cranial nerves, and you have the perfect recipe for a disembodied head that can still make facial expressions. This brings up an interesting question. What would you make your last facial expression on Earth? I think I'd go with like a really over-the-top wink. You might remember that back there I said you would be conscious for a few seconds, which is enough time to experience your head rolling down the hill and look back at your own body. But that may not be the end of the ride for the brain on a whole. The best way to explain this is think of the last time you had a really vivid dream. You were not conscious and you probably weren't in control, but you were still going on a ride. Remember that brain death starts about 2 to 3 minutes after the oxygen supply is cut off. During that time, your neurons are going to be firing like crazy. And this may explain some of the experiences of like people's lives flashing before their eyes or near-death experiences. Let me show you what that might look like. Whew! It turns out a dying brain can be pretty creative. Obviously, the brain activity of a decapitated human is not something you can ethically study. But as it turns out, you can study it in mice and pigs. The ethics question might still be up for debate. If you find yourself up for reincarnation at some point, make sure you're not an animal that's going to be around humans. The head is obviously the main attraction, but there might be some interesting stuff going on with your body as well. If you've ever been around an animal that's lost its head, you may have noticed that their body can still do some pretty interesting things. And that is because there are spinal nerves and spinal reflexes that can function without your head. And there are more than a few disturbing reports of bodies twitching, slapping at the air, grasping with their hands, rolling, or even trying to crawl away. On a related and equally crazy note, this is Mike the chicken. He lived 18 months without his head. You might be wondering how that's possible. Well, it comes down to a farmer that's not very good with an axe, and he actually missed part of his brainstem, leaving his breathing and heart functions intact. Thankfully, the same circumstance cannot arise in humans because all of our vital parts are inside of our skull. So if your head is gone, you are gone. Man, I hope my headless body can bust out the Macarena one last time. I know this was kind of a long one, but I hope you enjoyed it. As always, thanks for learning with me, and if you've got a question, you know what to do.